Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us for the start of another week. Of course, we start tonight with the latest on those fires impacting New Providence and Abaco. Here in the capital, a brush fire in Sea Beach Estate sparking panic among residents as flames came dangerously close to their homes, prompting them to grab hoses and buckets to keep the flames at bay. As Devontae Hanna tells us tonight, thankfully the blaze left minimal damage in its trail.
It was a tense morning in Sea Beach Estates off West Bay Street as a small brush fire flared up just meters away from several homes.
I jumped over the fence and got some hoses and started putting out the fire. As you can see, all the fencing started to get burned, the trees. I put water on the roof so that the roof wouldn't start burning.
Now, as the fire raged on, residents rushed to their fences using any possible resource to help tame the blaze. At this point, professional fire services are on the ground doing their work, but after 2 hours long fighting, these residents did anything to ensure that their properties remain safe.
I knew we just needed water and the hoses weren't doing much. I learned very quickly that, you need to get water on it very fast. A neighbor thought about, accessing the water from the pool and also setting up a pressure washer, which is working quite well.
The cause of the blaze not known, but environmental expert, president and CEO of One Consultant, Eric Carey, says rising temperatures and human activity are key contributors.
There are people intentionally lighting fires. I'm told this is what the volunteer chief from Abaco was saying this morning. That's very concerning, that there's some arsonists at play, and hopefully some of these could be caught and punished, because that's a very dangerous thing.
This is the latest in a string of brush fires across the country in recent weeks, with firefighters and volunteers still battling a blaze in Abaco. Carey acknowledges that this is the dry season.
When these fires ignite during dry periods and in dry areas, then clearly they're going to spread very quickly and grow and then be very difficult to control.
There has been no reports of injury or property damage, but this close call has left many residents shaken. For the Bahamas Tonight, I'm Devontae Hanna.
Well, actually, these fires continue. There were fires as well in Abaco today, and of course, firefighters were busy fighting those. But a slow return to normalcy for traffic to some degree in the area of Victoria Avenue following last Thursday's massive fire on Bay. Our news team spoke with a representative from Phil's Trucking, who says it may be a matter of weeks before the area is completely cleared and rebuilding efforts can begin. Now, you may recall that this gigantic fire started after 8 p.m. Thursday and destroyed 4 buildings in the area of Bay Street and Victoria and Elizabeth Avenues. And of course, those fires sparking concern for residents, particularly since the summer months aren't that far away. And of course, to provide us with some answers tonight is Assistant Police Commissioner Marino Hines, whose portfolio includes the Fire Services Department, as well as training, Family Islands, and traffic. That's a lot to cover. ACP Hines, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Watson.
So we've seen, this has been, it seems almost unreal. Fires almost every day, burning. Some of these massive fires, some of these very destructive fires. We've seen the one by Solomon's Building and the new Department of Labor. Seen fires in Grand Bahama that seem uncontrollable. Fires in Abaco, one just yesterday, one they're fighting today in Abaco, destroying parts of Cable Bahamas. We saw the fire at Victoria Gardens, Bay Street. We saw a fire out west today. It seems as though, I don't know, what is going on? Is this as a result of brush fires or a dry season, or are you suspecting there may be arson in any of these instances? What say you?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Watson. We look at the science behind it, and we look at what the data is telling us. March to June is typically a very dry period, and because it's so dry, you see a resurgence of fires. Now, these building fires is extremely unusual,
right?
Because we don't normally have large buildings that catch a blaze, so it can only be deemed coincidental until we have some empirical evidence which suggests that there is something else, whether it's nefarious or otherwise, which would cause us to go down those lines of inquiry.
Having these fires are one thing. Being able to fight them is another.
Yes.
And that has been where the firefighters have come under the microscope of persons, particularly those impacted, to saying that, listen, the response is slow, and when the response comes, there's this wait for water period. Clarify this for us, because it's hard to believe that firefighters, first of all, take a long time to show up on a scene, particularly in the capital. I mean, we're a small island.
Right.
Shouldn't take long to get anywhere.
Right.
Secondly, the fact that you come, you show up, and you're waiting as if you're defenseless, as people suggest, that there's no water.
Right.
Clarify this for us.
Okay, I'm happy to. I want to say that in this instance, when we talk about the Victoria Avenue and Elizabeth Avenue fires, we got a call shortly right around 8:30 p.m. Our presence was 8:40. And so I would leave that to any suspecting mind to make and draw their own conclusions. We believe that the time that we were mobilized and the time that we actually arrived at the fire is consistent with getting your gear, getting the fire apparatuses in
So
motion.
you're saying it was not that they an odd amount of time that people are complaining, an hour or half an hour?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Our response time was approximately 9 to 10 minutes. Because remember, where those fire apparatuses is housed is right on Elizabeth, right on East Street.
Correct.
Not so far from Elizabeth Avenue. And so we were there in a timely manner, and those apparatuses showed up with water. And as the officers came off the apparatuses, they were pumping water into those buildings. And so I want to say emphatically that those claims are completely false. The fire engines were there. The men and women who work extremely hard, they did their due diligence, and they were up to the task.
Matter of fact, one person even said the first truck to arrive was the airport truck. So clearly you're saying that's incorrect.
That is totally incorrect. I believe that is just Bahamian fodder and mischief. We had 3 apparatuses there, what you commonly call fire engines, and they were there in a prompt time. And after the fires began to spread, we called our partners from the airport authority.
Obviously, you're fighting these fires. Well, at any point in time, did the trucks run out of water? Because, of course, it can hold so much amount of water. At any point, do you run out?
Well, I will answer that like this, Mr. Watson. The trucks, they can carry 2,000 gallons in one instance, one of them, the other one 1,000 gallons. At no time were we ever lacking water because, as you know, the sea is right there. And so we used our pumper truck whenever those apparatuses were out of water, and they were consistently replenished so that there was an abundance of water.
So there was never a lull period where there was no water?
Never, sir, never.
Do you believe that you have sufficient trucks to be able to man New Providence?
I believe we do. However, there's always a need for new and modern technology because we've seen in the firefighting society the usage of unmanned vehicles, drones, et cetera, articulated firearms, long fire truck ladders which can reach buildings up to 200 feet. And so we would like to have these bright, shiny new toys, but it's all relative. I'm pleased to say that we are in the process of acquiring a lot of apparatuses which will help to aid us in this fight.
The opposition leader today said in the media that he will make fire services an independent organization if he wins the next general election. Is this a feasible move? As someone who obviously heads fire services, is that the issue? And do you believe that will bring any great efficiency?
Well, I'm not a political science
Right,
major.
and I'm just making reference. I know you can't get involved in politics.
I understand.
But I want to get an educated answer as to is this the problem?
Absolutely. I would say not. We have a cadre of dedicated, professional, highly skilled men and women who work in the fire department. And whenever there is a change, if there is a change, we move by certain protocol. And so we always adapt. We always strategize, we always assess the situation, and then we overcome. And so whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, we are able to pivot and meet the needs of whatever kind of regime that we find ourselves in.
Fire services come under the police, but does it have its own autonomy to operate and function?
Absolutely. Those men and women, they are highly skilled, as I asserted earlier, and they play two roles. They're police officers and they are trained firefighters. And so they're not like me, who only have one skill set. They actually have two. They're police officers and they are trained firefighters. So I commend them for the job that they do consistently on a daily basis, and we certainly appreciate them, and we can't live without them.
So in your estimation, we are able to consistently handle what it is that we're being presented with. Obviously, we know there are some challenges on some family islands.
Yes.
And we know the challenge we have in the Bahamas, or archipelago of islands.
Yes.
And we have to duplicate these services on every island, which
Yes.
can be very costly.
Yes.
But is there a focus to ensure that we at least have adequate supply and trucks on these islands to make sure that we can battle any blaze?
Absolutely. We, like I said, earlier this year, the commissioner, along with myself and some other officers from the Fire Services Department, we traveled to Germany and Scotland with a view to acquiring some apparatuses for the family islands in particular. And I'm pleased to say in very short order, the commissioner will announce that we're doing some very good things, and we believe that we're going to bring relief to many of our family islands.
All right, Assistant Commissioner Hines, thank you, and thank you, your men and women, for the services they provide. Oftentimes, we're quick to be the first to complain, but we don't understand the work and the labor that goes on, especially when it's strenuous circumstances like this. Fires happening repeatedly. Thank you to the men for serving and women for serving. Appreciate you being on tonight.
Thank you so much.
When we take a break, we're going to come back, and tonight we have a major show for you tonight. I call it the Exit Interview. The Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Dr. Raymond King, gives his final interview one-on-one with myself in his office. We talk about his life, his legacy, his work, and of course him moving on. It's a candid, I must say, the most candid discussion I think he's ever had since being Commodore. And we're going to bring that to you right after the break. Stay with us.
Mailboat service is a critical service to the islands of the Bahamas. Certainly, Andrews has always been there and dear to us. That's where we're born and raised. And so we play a crucial role in advancing the growth and development of Andrews. Customers want service and they want consistency. From the start, that's been our commitment. We work to sail on time every time. Our customers have come now to expect this from us. And one of the biggest challenges we've had was finding adequate funding. SPDC from the very start has been a lifesaver. My advice to young people, if you have a vision, a passion, an idea, go for it. Don't give up. It's not easy. If it was, everybody would be doing it. Be consistent and you'll get there.
Are you ready for the hardest sports show on the market? It's called The Timeout, Sundays on the ZNet Television Network. In our first show, 4 decades of sports in the country.
Planning the execution of a newscast is serious business. From the assignment to the concept of the story, everything has to be precise, on point, always. The Bahamas Tonight, the National Report, is your trusted news service. We get it right the first time. Our preparation for you each night is done with care, knowing that our voices will reach you on 700 islands and keys with unquestionable accuracy. It gives me great pleasure each night to say,
welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the National Report. I'm your national anchor, Mukesh Lopinder.
Welcome back. He's been for the last perhaps 4.5 years Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, a time that he deems has been transformative for that institution and one where he believes he has served earnestly and with his entire heart. This week, he will bid farewell to that top role and pass on the reins to his successor. What does this mean for him? How does he feel about it? In a candid one-on-one with me earlier today, the Defense Force Commodore spoke about those tough questions that we've been waiting to ask him. Here's that interview. Commodore King, it seems like only weeks we were talking in a different setting, obviously, but talking about your plans, your vision, your goals for the future. And I hinted at the fact as to whether you would be continuing or not, and you didn't quite answer that question, but here we are. You're now making your exit. And so as a journalist, I can't help but ask what transpired between then and now, and the decision to move on. Talk a little bit about that.
Good evening, Mr. Watson. Thanks for this opportunity. At that time, during our interview, I was still contractually obligated and in command of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. So it would have been imprudent for me to speak about any future plans because the government simply had not made a decision at that time. But since then, the government has made a decision, and at some point in the near future, I look forward to an appointment whereby I'll be able to contribute meaningfully and continually to the development of this country. But at that time, I didn't want to preempt the government.
So I'm glad you gave me two answers in one. So one, you're not done just serving, just in this capacity. We can hopefully see you serve the country in another capacity soon.
Yes, sir, most certainly.
And then about the decision to move on, how did that settle with you? Obviously, you're saying the government made a decision. How does that sit with you?
To be honest with you, having spent almost 4 decades in one single organization, it becomes a part of you. My family, basically, all of us were in the military. That's where I met my wife during my 2nd year in the service, and both of my sons are part of the military, one deceased. And so it becomes a part of you. It's a bit bittersweet, but I accept that, and the Bible tells us, for everything under the sun, there's a season. And you gotta trust the divine purpose when that season ends. And so I look forward with promise, great promise, of contributing, probably even on a grander scale, to development of this country. But it becomes a part of you. We would have developed friendships almost 40 years. And those friendships remain long after we would have exited the service. But I am satisfied given the contributions I would have made, particularly over the last 5.5 years when I commanded the organization. I was very transformative and progressive in my thinking in moving the organization forward. I would have had an opportunity to exercise my agility in responding to Hurricane Dorian, the global pandemic, 2 of the most difficult periods in this nation's history. And I would have really put in significant systems, units and departments that this organization needs. And I always told the subordinates and the commanders that the systems that I was putting in place are systems that the developed world and the developed armed forces have that we were lacking. And it was not about me. It's about putting in systems to ensure the sustainability and the success of this organization long after I would have departed office. And so that work is left behind. That work will have to be followed through. I'm sure there are a number of Joshua's coming behind me to move those programs through. And as I reflect, more than 65% of the officers in the organization now would have been trained under my leadership during my 38.5+ years. And more than 40 officers would have been converted to the officers during that 5.5-year period.
Let me ask you, do you feel you were done? As leaders, while everything we do is based on time and seasons, we also have plans and goals. Was there more for you to contribute in your view?
Most certainly. There are a number of major initiatives, like the development of our Center of Excellences, our Drone Academy, Bahamas Maritime and Military Academy, two major initiatives. Because I'm one who believes in lifelong learning and the continuous learning in order to professionalize organization. There are a number of great initiatives that I would have instituted, and of course some leaders would want that opportunity to see it to fruition, but very rare. And I learned that throughout my career. I've had successful commands, and just when I got into that groove, the leadership saw, well, okay, we could move King so he could create greater impacts within the organization as opposed to creating any glory holes. When I served as the port controller, and that was a very insightful and enjoyable time. And I was sent back to turn things around following Hurricane Dorian. And whenever I see the staff from the port department, they would embrace me and say, you were the best boss we've ever had. We wish you had stayed longer. And similarly in this position, right? I've done exceptionally well. I think I would have self-actualized that it took very little energy. I was basically operating on automatic pilot and moving the organization. And so I accept that seasons come and seasons end. Evidently, I would have loved to continue those programs, to bring them to fruition. But as I mentioned a bit earlier, there are a number of officers, more than 65% in the organization, who would have been trained under my leadership, and more than, I'll say 40% now would have converted. They would have seen the vision, and they would more than likely be the justices to ensure continuation of those programs. So I leave the organization in good hands.
Do you see this as a move of pioneering, one where you're called at various opportunities to pioneer new works, or do you see this as a judgment on your leadership?
I would say pioneering, because my leadership is unquestioned. One doesn't like to boast, because I remember I was doing, during my doctoral program, during one of my leadership classes, and we were asked to view ourselves in a survey and then have other persons take the same survey. And for some reason, you find that you always rate yourself higher than persons perceive you. And so that is real. But my legacy will reflect. The historians will reflect my life of service and sacrifice, and in the way not only the Royal Bahamas Defense Force was managed, but the port department and every unit and craft I would have commanded. And so I think that's a question that we allow the publics, the critical stakeholders, to answer that question. But I'm quite satisfied that I would have led with professionalism, integrity, and with a deep found vision of being dedicated and committed and being devoted to my duties. And I did that from the first day I joined in January 1987.
Your years of service in the Defense Force, to some may be a lifetime, and to others a half of a lifetime. So it may be difficult to answer this question, but nonetheless, we'll give a crack at it. What stands out to you as the most memorable moment in your service?
There are several. There was an incident when I was in command of HMBS Nassau, and we had made a poaching arrest. And there were 3 Dominican vessels on the Great Bahama Bank, and they all absconded, and I decided to go after them, what I considered to be the mothership. And during that chase, we got our seaboat underway, and the persons on board the Dominican boat started to throw engine parts and other stuff to try not to be intercepted because they were trying to make it into the Cuban territory to end the search.
Wow.
I mean, the chase. And they went to the extent, there were a number of them who actually jumped overboard.
Really?
Jumped overboard. And we were able to stop the vessel using warning fire. We conducted the boarding. We detained the vessel. And the cover of darkness came. And I give thanks that it was a quiet and calm evening. And we went into recovery mode. Then we went into a quiet ship. And I was determined to save every soul. And it took us a while. But we moved slowly on the reciprocal track that the chase was on. And I give thanks that those persons, they were good swimmers, they were able to stay afloat. And there's about 7 of those persons. Because you could imagine the international implications or repercussions of you affecting a poaching arrest where there were loss of lives. And that stands out to me as one of the most memorable events for me, saving all 7 of those persons, and it was under the cover of darkness. And I often reflect on that incident. But throughout all of my feats that I would have done, and I always reflect on the response to Hurricane Dorian and the changes we had to make in response to the global pandemic, which really stretched my leadership in terms of being agile. And then all of the transformative initiatives moving towards a center of excellences and really placing focus on the families of our deployed members for extended periods through the Family Readiness and Support Office, the Morale, Welfare and Recreational Unit, to ensure that all of our members, past and present, and their families, every event that Defense Force has, to ensure that they could be a part of it and they could enjoy all of the amenities that we have, the medical facility, shopping at the exchange, using the gym facility, and to ensure that aspect, because I'm a true believer of if employees perceive that you care, you will get them to go above and beyond. They'll take ownership of your goals and objectives. And so you have to demonstrate that concern and care. And so that was a part of my legacy and moving forward. And I often say, apart from the leadership, transformative, organizational agility, the expert knowledge that I brought to stemming, the migration, the poaching, and all of those threats that we face, all right, I simply say, I consider myself to have been a faithful steward or simply a servant of the people.
I want to start this question, and then we'll continue at the end of the break, at the next segment. I think it's a great segue to our next discussion, and that is, having said all of that, what do you believe your legacy will be that you have left behind? I want to talk about you as Commodore, and then, quite frankly, the way forward for you. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Stay close. You're watching a special edition of The Rundown with the Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, days or maybe even hours before he hands over the reins of power. We're back, and after this, stay close.
Your home is your sanctuary. The last thing you need to worry about is rodents. Once they enter your property, they can be tough to get out. If you're concerned about rodents, call Rent-A-Kill initially. We offer the latest, most effective treatment for safe, fast, and long-lasting results. From prevention to elimination, our integrated approach guarantees protection. For rodent control you can trust, there's only one name in the Bahamas. Rent-A-Kill Initial.
I am a master plumber by profession. I've been doing plumbing for over 40-odd years. When I was 9 months old, I was diagnosed with polio. To me, living with polio, I took it the way it is. I never allowed my polio to get in my way of anything. In fact, I love when people doubt me, and I just prove them wrong. And let me tell you, in the world, you could only find a plumber as good as me, but you ain't gonna find no plumber better than me. People with disability, they just need a chance. In this program, I feel so encouraged. Most of the mentors have different kinds of disability, but disabilities like me. Sharing and caring and showing so much support with people with disability. They would encourage you to go beyond. I wish this was around a long time ago. Right now, I would have been a millionaire. You out there who have a disability, don't be afraid. Take the step. If you believe it, you could achieve it. And remember one thing, ain't no one better than me, and ain't no one better than y'all. God made all us equal.
For more information about how the SBDC can help your small business to make a big impact, give us a call at 461-7232 or visit sbdcbahamas.com. The internet isn't just for surfing. There's a sea of shoppers buying online, and you can connect with them on Tingsy. Tingsy is the SBDC's online storefront built for Bahamians. Take your business to the next level by selling to customers online, both at home and around the world. People want Bahamian things, and if you got things to sell, sell on Tingsy. Find out how you can connect with a sea of buyers by visiting tingsybahamas.com.
Welcome back to the Rundown. You're watching a special edition interview with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Commodore Dr. Raymond King, just days before he hands over the reins of power. And before the break, we talked about some of the things that you feel about this move and about what you think you've done. While I think I have a pretty good idea what you're going to say, it's important to establish it. What do you believe your legacy will be as Commodore of the Defense Force?
Concisely, I see my legacy being underscored as a servant of the people. Every day I came to work, determined and committed to give it my best. And every day I left this office, I left satisfied that I would have given it my best in terms of not only the safety and security in terms of border management, but I placed considerable efforts on two other campaigns. The National Youth Development. We had a very vibrant youth development program, the Rangers, the Program Shock, the TOPS program, the HYPE program. Any calendar year, we had at least 1,200 students and some 80 entities that we interface with. And so that could be a part of it. In terms of being a community leader, socially corporate citizen, every department was mandated to conduct a community project every quarter. And so we would have averaged almost 40 community relations programs annually. And so in being a faithful steward or servant of the people, I really sought to actionalize the vision of our late father of the nation, Sir Linda Pendling, and his view of what the Defense Force should have looked like. And that's why, in addition to border management, I sought to ensure our involvement in the community through the community relations, the development and intervention programs with the youth. We run initiatives and taskings whereby we provide force protection for our diplomats and foreign service personnel. We assist entities. We continue to work collaboratively with the police force and all of their anti-gang and anti-trafficking of ammunition and domestic crime. And so to really fulfill our mandate and being a part of ensuring the peace and security and enforcement of law and order in the country. And I always sought to do what was best for the largest number of persons at all times. So I always considered our critical stakeholders, the implication of the organization's actions in terms of everything that we do, direct or otherwise. I always factored that. But again, there's so much I would have gotten done, and it depends on who you ask. Some may reflect on my expert knowledge in terms of leadership and really dealing with the transnational threats. Some may look at the transformational aspect and how I sought to aggressively transform the organization. with all of those initiatives and being a learning institution and professionalizing the organization. Some may look at the organizational agility, which I exuded, in being able to respond to Hurricane Dorian and to the global pandemic, and then bring the organization out of those two periods to focus on youth, community, as well as maintain our border protection and working collaboratively and jointly with all of our uniform branches. And so it all depends on you, who you ask. Persons may look at that professional aspect, and persons may look at the campaigns that I run, all right, the community as well as youth, and some may look at the transformation of the organization. But I saw something recently, and I had nothing to do with it. The public is referring to me as the People's Commodore. And I say, you know what? Some persons are already starting to shape my legacy. But I think I know why. I was given the opportunity to be instituted by the previous administration and to finish my contract under the current government, of which I'm really and truly grateful to have been allowed to complete my last 3.5 years as a part of my appointment, and to serve both governments with the public as my focus. Border protection, the inclusion and involvement of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force with its community stakeholders, the youth development, working with national agencies, and I was able to focus on our mandate and missions, irrespective of which government I was serving. I don't think there's anyone in this country who would have either executed the Free National Movement's manifesto or the current government's blueprint for change. Because I was able to make the necessary adjustments to ensure that those objectives were achieved. I'll give you an example. When this government came to power, one of the first things I realized from the Blueprint for Change, it didn't have a national strategy, security strategy. I'm the author who developed and designed a national security strategy for the government. The National Youth Guard. We had a concept already within the Defense Force. It was me who presented that on my first meeting with the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, that concept which was transformed with minimal changes to the National Youth Guard.
Wow.
And so I was able to navigate the organization to accomplish the government's priorities while maintaining border protection, community involvement, and national youth development.
Let me ask you, Commodore, because a lot of people believe top positions like these must be political. What is your view? Are you able to hold and execute effectively a top position like a Commodore and not be political?
The appointment is political. And regrettably, in this country, whichever administration installs you, you perceive and you attach to that administration regardless of what your political persuasion is. And that's something I don't think we'll ever get away with. Whomever install you, as far as they're concerned, you're with that administration. And so that day is real, okay? I've been able to work as the port controller with a few permanent secretaries and ministers, and they allowed me to function without political interference. And likewise now, both administrations, they saw the vision, the strategy that I was executing, they supported it, we got all of the resources we needed, ensuring that the organization was completely resourced, manned with recruitment exercise, and all of the necessary training we needed. And so it's difficult. These positions are politically appointed. And so, but the Defense Acts and Regulation is such that we are strictly prohibited for getting involved with any political activities, engaging in having any political paraphernalia on anything you personally own, your vehicles, your homes, and not to allow any political meetings at any of our establishments. And I think because of that, we know it is an offense. I think it keeps most persons honest because you know you have to stay apolitical. And so I haven't experienced any undue pressure by either administration in the performance of my duties. And I think I was so comprehensive in my duties and so successful that the issue of being politically interfered with in doing my job was never an issue. And I acted as the principal and the expert advisors, and I took pride in doing that. And I'll always remember the Thursdays when I had to account for the organization with meetings with both prime ministers, and having to account for my stewardship of this organization.
4 decades of Defense Force work gives you a pretty good view on the caliber of officers. We know what we face in this country. Whether it's police officers or defense officers, they only can come from the people in the community. And we've seen a challenge in our community, the fabric of society being broken down, the moral fabric. Have you seen over the years the challenge in being able to find the kind of Defense Force officer that we used to have? Or has it gone in the opposite direction? We're now getting better recruits than we once have.
To be candid with you, because whenever we have our Hornlear meeting with all of the law enforcement agencies, heads, and we speak about these recruitment issues, and I determine and realize that all of us, the last entries that all of us would have taken in within the last 4 years, those are the persons who are being taken before the courts and arrested. And so there is an issue, there is a problem in this country. And we try our best to, without knowing their backgrounds. Because when you go and you do your security vetting, you have to trust what the neighbors are saying. Once you do the SIB and the security vetting from the police, you have to accept the results. But it doesn't paint the full picture. And we do research on persons' Facebook accounts to really see who they are. And so it's a stringent process. But we found that over the last 4 years, the persons who are getting themselves in problems for all of us have been those entries. And so we do have an issue with the quality of persons. But I'll say this. As I reflect on the Rangers program, there's very few instances of any Ranger, former, getting involved and being arrested. And I'm a 7-day Adventist, and similarly for the Pathfinders, because I've done considerable work with them. Very few, if any, Pathfinders. And so we have a lot of programs that are positive alternative activities for youth. That all is not lost. But there's a segment and a sector, and the government, as a part of its 5-pronged national security plan, seeks to address those in terms of being preventative. And that's why, like my sister agencies, we have expended considerable resources with the national youth programs in ensuring that we provide positive events and alternatives for them so they can grow up to be productive citizens and not incarcerated and be a burden to society. And so there is an issue that all of us would have experienced, but we continue to work through those issues. My minister, he would have lent his advice in terms of some remedial program and trying to help persons who we end up with who are troubled. And I was able to recruit 2 doctors who are part of the BDoc system, one a psychiatrist and one a psychologist, to assist us in that remedial program to assist to help persons as opposed to just flushing them out of the system, because they only become a burden to society. And so we try our best through counseling, professional help, to try to work with those persons, and only in cases where that simply does not work, or they get themselves in problems with the law and they are convicted. There's nothing we can do with that regards, but we are not just getting rid of them, but the quality of persons being recruited now, by far, they are a concern to all of the agencies. Okay, but we have the large portion of persons, the rangers, the pathfinders, and I'm sure the Boys Brigade and all of those other youth groups and the track clubs, that what we're experiencing is probably only a percentage of the population. And so I think if we do a better job at recruiting, whereby we try to recruit persons from those entities, and we exhaust energies in the Rangers program from as early as from the primary school levels, where we sought to give them preferential entry into the job once they express an interest. But I was really hoping, and the government had consented tacitly by legislation, to establish the RBDF Cadet Corps, similar to the Belize Cadet Corps. And so once those Rangers would have completed their programs between the ages of 16 to 18, they could be recruited in that program. We can continue to develop them until they reach the age of 18 and then have them formally enlisted. And I was fighting to have that done, and I believe it will in time. Not everything will be accomplished during a person's tenure, but I would have left that particular initiative in motion, and hopefully it is done.
I'm going to come back in one final segment, and in that final segment I want to talk about mental health, and then your successor and your words of advice to the people that you will leave this Defense Force to. We'll be back to wrap up right after this break. Stay with us. You're watching The Rundown.
Bahamas Driving Group of Companies, we have been in Exuma now for the past 4 years, carrying out our paving program. A part of our company's philosophy is to do some work to international standards. So when you look at our paving division, we have a state-of-the-art lab to do all of our testing in-house, as well as a state-of-the-art asphalt plant with a trained technician carrying out the work on that site. The overarching goal of our company is to produce the work that we're doing in the entire Bahamas to international standards. We also make a difference by the training of our staff. We have a very intensive training program going on to where we are teaching young men how to learn the art of striping. Being a young man myself, I've made mistakes in the past. I was given a second chance to better my life, and it's only fitting that we pass that along. What's important for us is giving them a second chance for them to get a skill and a career that could take them further in life.
Summer in the Bahamas. The weather is hot, but not as hot as the ZNS summer packages. Get ads on ZNS TV or ZNS Radio Network or the TV community page, or a combination of all three. ZNS has got you covered with great prices, whatever package you choose. Book before June 7th and get the local Federation Championship Baseball bonus full of all kinds of extras free of charge. Contact your account executive or call ZNS Sales at 502-3800 today. Hot summer package rates valid until July 31st.
Welcome to What's Trending. Join me, Jiminita Swain.
And me, The Bahama Beauty, Monday through Thursday at 6 p.m.
Only on the ZNS Network.
Wrapping up a conversation with the Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Dr. Raymond King, as he prepares to hand over the reins of power. And there's an issue that I think about when I think about law enforcement agencies in this country and all that we face with law enforcement agencies, and that is the mental well-being of officers. Is mental health an issue on the Defense Force?
We've experienced several instances where persons would have exhibited mental health symptoms. And that was why, in my vision, in addition to the access that the organization has, wide the medical insurance to professionals on the outside, and we have used some of them in the past, to bring that expertise into the organization. So Dr. Knowles, a known psychiatrist, very critical to analyzing any cases or any concerns that comes up through the divisional system that our persons really admit mentally they're finding the difficulty in terms of coping. And so we're able to give those persons direct counseling sessions, the help that they need. And then the psychologist, Dr. Delano Roll, he's also a part of that process in providing that professional service for our members. And so the mental health is real. Our operations sometimes expose persons to conditions the average person may not come in contact with. And so mentally, we have to deal with those issues. I've had persons mention to me recently that the exposure, even from Hurricane Dorian, and what persons may have seen during COVID-19 is still bothering them. So I would have had to direct persons through those two doctors to assess them, to ensure that we give them the help that they need. And so mental health is real, and that's why, in short, that we have those professional services here within the Defense Force.
What about family structure? People often talk about it. It's been a systemic problem over the ages that Defense Force families are challenged because, one, you're away from families for a long time. Many officers, you're either out to sea, sometimes up to a month. You're on post, special assignment. Leaves of absence can come anytime. We just saw one last weekend, and maybe you want to address what that leave of absence is all about. Because people are thinking, no hurricane, ain't no war. Why is there a cancellation of leave of absence? But those things put pressure and strain on family structures. And I know a man like you who's been very big on wholeness and wellness and structure and family and support understands that. How are you able to strike a balance or bring some kind of intervention to those kinds of issues where families is challenged?
Okay, have done several things. One, thanks to the emerging technology, the Starlink technology, I was able to persuade the government to acquiring that technology that is now implemented and installed on all of our vessels at sea. And so regardless of where they are, they can get online, they can WhatsApp, they can video chat with their children and their families. So that connectedness is there. I remember early on in my career, we didn't have that opportunity. Once you went out to sea, they never really heard from you unless you had some shore leave in one of the family islands. So the technology and including that as a part of the services that we provide, that has helped tremendously. The other thing I would have done, and I would have alluded to earlier, the morale, wellness, and morale and recreational unit. That unit ensures the inclusion of family members, particularly of members who are deployed, and wholesome organizational activities. We just had the Family Fun Day on Stakeholder over the weekend, and we've had a number of family-related events and activities. The other thing was the establishment of the Family Readiness and Support Unit. That unit stays in contact, particularly with family members of members who are deployed for those extended periods, to maintain that link with them. And they know that if they have an issue, they have a group of confidential persons in that office that they can speak to and get any help or assistance that they need. So those are three things. That Family Readiness and Support Unit, of which my wife, she would have done considerable work. While I commanded, she gave of herself. She was also critical in the Morale, Welfare, and Recreational Unit and the genesis of that. And the technology that we have now would have closed the gap considerably to address those issues of loneliness and not being able to speak or communicate with our family members. And it also goes further. Persons are now able to do online classes even while they are at sea. The advancement courses is accessible, it's digitized now, and so you don't really have to be here in New Providence to ensure inclusion in those programs. So that is how we would have addressed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Some of the leave of absence. People are wondering, why was leave canceled? Are you able to say what that, because people are thinking there's no hurricane, no threat, or national threat, why the cancellation of leave?
It's interesting that everything that we do, for some reason, it gets national attention. You know, I visited major naval establishments, and they publish these all the time. I mean, you don't get public reaction to it.
Right, right.
Right? But what we need to establish is that members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, you're never off. You're simply on shore leave, which can be canceled at any time, other than if you take approved vacation and you're traveling out of the country. You're only on shore leave, right? But I made that decision because I wanted to ensure adequate representation and inclusion of our members at this change of command ceremony. I wanted to ensure that, because these exercises are very far and few between for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. My two predecessors would have lasted 5 years. Commodore Scobal, I think, 3 years. Davy Roll was 9. Commodore Leon Smith was 13 years. And so to witness and to be a part of these events is critical. But these are naval traditions. And a part of what we do is to ensure that members are steeped in the customs, the values, and the tradition of this organization, because it's unique. And to ensure that as many persons, and they would appreciate it afterwards, being a part of the ceremony, seeing how it's executed, and being able to say farewell to the outgoing and embrace the incoming.
I've got about 2 minutes left. I'm going to get these last 2 questions in. And the first one is talk about your successor, who he is, which part of the rank is he coming from?
Captain Floyd Moxey, he's a captain. He was part of the executive leadership. He would have spent the last 3.5 years working as a legal aid to the Honorable Minister, so he was redeployed to the Ministry of National Security. He's one that he and I would have sailed on crafts. He was my senior for a large part. He came from the radio and radar department. I was a mechanical engineer, and then I crossed over to the officer corps. And we would have worked on several platforms together, and he's one that I always had deep respect for. Because when I joined as a mechanic within the mechanic engineering branch.
You capable?
Yes, without a doubt. His deputies will definitely bring varied expertise to assist with his leadership, but the advice I gave him is this: to avoid disruptive changes. Maintain the status quo for a large part, and in order for him to be successful. When you make disruptive changes, you're going to go into a period of inertia, and sometimes it takes a while to get going again. And I shared with him the advice what Commodore Davy Roll had said to me when I was coming to office. He said, persons will come to you, and everybody wants you to change something. And he advised me to try to understand and research why that policy or rule was instituted in the first place. You're able to make more informed decisions.
In 60 seconds, your advice to the men and women of the Defense Force as you take your leave.
I want to firstly thank them for their dedication, their commitment, and their devotion to duty. We've had an exceptional run. It's roughly 5.5 years. We would have done extremely well. The country needs us in terms of defense and security services, and we must always seek to provide those services at the highest professional levels that we're able to. The new leadership coming in, you have to galvanize around the new leadership and give them the same level of support that I would have received from you. Because this is larger than just Commodore King or Commodore to be Moxey coming in. We have external stakeholders who depend and rely on the services that we provide to ensure the safety, security, and the prosperity of our Commonwealth.
I'll tell you, the Commodore is excited about the way forward for him, but he's also a bit emotional as to having spent most of his life at this institution, and he's a bit anxious as to how his emotions will fare come this week when he gives over the realms of office. We wish him well, and we do thank him for talking candidly to us today and sharing his heart. Well, that does it for the rundown. Be sure to stay locked on the ZNS network for the Bahamas Night at 11. It's the final newscast in the country with the latest news and information with Royce and Jones. He's already in the building preparing for that. For all of us here at ZNS, I'm Clint Watson.